Tzei Shabbos Parshas Kedach. We are up to Daf Lamed Tes Amud Aleph, and we are up to 6 lines from the top. The last 2 words of the line is Lema Ketanoi. Yeah. And well, basically, what we have here is we have an argument between Rabbah and Rav Yosef. And this happens quite often when you have 2 people arguing about what somebody else said, which the only possible explanation is that there's one time Rabbah said, speaking in the name of Rav, and Rav must have had one time one opinion, and another time he changed his mind. And the question, I guess, is which was first and which was second. So we have an argument between Rabbah and Rav Yosef, and that is if somebody uses the expression as follows: I am making my slave hektish. Hamaktish yidei abda, making my slave hektish. What happens in that case? According to Rabbah, obviously your slave cannot become a carbon, can become, so it can't be cut from his bech. Obviously, your slave cannot be part of the wall, the construction of the wall. If he forms part of the wall, so he cannot be part of the Bedek Habayis. It didn't consecrate him. So what did you mean with the word makdish? What you meant was literally makdish means am kaddish. It should be part of the holy nation, and therefore he should now be set free. He should be a full-fledged yid that he can marry a bascher. He can marry anybody. That's Rabbah's opinion. Rabbi Yosef disagrees. He says. And you need a get shikha, you need a star to enable the person to become a full-fledged yid. According to Rabbi Yosef, that only applies to hefker. If he said the word hefker, ownerless, I'm giving your way, so on, that's when we say that he's free and so on. But if he uses the word hegdish, Rabbi Yosef says no. We can interpret what he meant was, don't take it literally. He meant was the value of this eved should be donated to the Beis Hamikdash. The eved itself still remains an eved. So that was the argument you have between Rabbah and Rabbi Yosef. The last thing we learned was that maybe this has to do with the argument of Rav Meir and Chachamim. If a person's words are to be taken, serious and so on, or not. But the Gemara says their argument perhaps is different, and we go as follows.
Why can't it simply mean that the slave is going to go work for the Beis Hamikdash?
Not work. You consecrate. When you consecrate, means he forms part of the walls of the Beis Hamikdash.
No, so he's now going to be a labor for the Beis Hamikdash.
So that's not consecrated, is he? Consecrated, holy. So there are 2 ways of understanding then what you do with a slave. Either you're saying that the slave is my slave, but the value of the slave is what I'm donating to the Beis Hamikdash. That's what Rabbi Yosef. Or you can say, I am donating the slave to the Beis Hamikdash that they should sell the slave, and with that money, with the proceeds, use that for maintenance. And that was the argument Rameh and the Chachamim, whether it's the Dmei Eved or Eved L'Dmei. The 2 opinions. We don't want to reiterate that, but that's what you learned yesterday. Says the Gemara, Lema Ketanoi. The Lamed Tes Amud Aleph, we're starting from 7 lines on top of the page. Lema Ketanoi. This very issue between Rabbah and Rabbi Yosef is actually an argument of Tanoim. Whether you can make an Eved Hegdish, what happens? Says the Gemara, Hamakdish Avdoi. If somebody makes his Eved Kodesh, the question is, does the Eved become Kodesh or not? Does the Eved become Kodesh, for example, in order that you sell it to L'Dameh? Does the Eved itself become Kodesh? And then the Hegdish will sell it and with the money use it, or the Eved does not become Kodesh at all. It's the value of the Eved that is donated. So it says in the Braise, Hamakdish Avdoi ein moyelin boy. After you made it Hegdish, if somebody uses the Eved, you're not moyel. Moyel means literally stealing from the Beis Hamikdash. If you use something which has been consecrated for your own use, if you did it b'shaygig, it becomes chulin. You have to reimburse Hegdish the value, add an additional 5th, plus you pay a guilt offering, a carbon asham. So there's no status of me'ilah by an Eved, which obviously tells you when you made the Eved Hegdish, it did not become holy, did not become consecrated. What you did was you gave the value, either you gave the value of the Eved Hegdish, or as we said before, he becomes a full-fledged yid. But Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says, Moyelim B'Sarei. That you are, yes, the Eved is consecrated, has been holy, and if you use it, you are stealing, and if you use it here, you're stealing. Why we mention here, the Gemara will talk about soon. My lab, what they're arguing, Kaddish, one of them holds that the Eved himself becomes Kaddish, so therefore if you use it for your own use, you are stealing from Hegdish. Well, like Kaddish, the Eved does not become holy in any sense of the word, and then it's only the value of the Eved or whatever, and therefore there's no Milah. Says the Gemara, "V'tizbra." Let's understand. You think that's really what they're arguing about? If so, why do we use the words whether there's meal or not? The basis for whether there's meal or not is to whether it became holy. So let them talk about the basic and that basis, and that is, did the Eved become holy or not? Hi moilin boy, why talk about whether you're stealing? Hi kaddish, they should talk about first whether they became holy, they didn't become holy. Ella says the Gemara. We can say that everyone agrees that the Eved does become holy. So if so, why is there an argument whether you're moil or not? They're arguing as follows. There's an argument we can have in Baba Kama and in other places. How do we treat a servant? In certain dinim, we compare a servant to karka, that you don't swear, a certain dinim about them. But generally speaking, is Eved treated like karka or like metalton? On the one hand, it's like metalton because it's mobile. On the other hand, it's much more chasha, much more significant, and maybe it should be treated like karka. And that's the argument here, because we know that when you're stealing from the base of Mikdash, it's only a case of portable items, not a case of karka. So an Eved legally has a status of something which is it's your property, therefore there's no me'ilah, no stealing. I know that it's portable, and therefore it's like metalton, and you are stealing. Says the Gemara, okay, if that, so they're arguing whether the Eved, they're stealing. No, they're not arguing whether Eved is holy. Everyone agrees the Eved is holy. They're arguing whether it's considered stealing when you're taking from the Eved. That's the question. We're a Lamed Tes Amud Aleph about, I don't know, someone can say where we are, about 15 lines at the top of the page, where you are in the Art Scroll.
39A2, second column, second paragraph. First column, second paragraph.
Says Hachi, if so, if they're arguing essentially whether an Eved is considered like karka or mobile, if so, at the miflagi besari, why only argue regarding the hair of the Eved? Talk about the Eved himself. What's the difference with the hair and not the hair? Why does the Rav Shimon ben Gamliel talk about the hair of the Eved? And what about the rest of the Eved? Ella. So therefore, we can interpret the Brisa differently. Kuli Alma, everyone agrees. Everyone agrees that an Eved has the same halacha like karka. So therefore, there's no me'ilah by an Eved. It does become holy, but the status is like karka, like property. So what's the argument? The argument here is only limited to a case of hair, which you're about to cut off. So the hair that's about to be cut off. How do we view the hair that's about to be cut off? At the moment, it's not cut off. Do we say, well, it's part of the Eved, therefore it's treated like property? There's no me'ilah if you decide to use the hair. Or do we say, since it's about to be cut off, it's treated as if it was cut off already? It's considered metalton, something portable, and therefore you will be considered a moil. So that's the argument. Masav goes cut off, and Masav love goes not cut off. Says the Gemara of so Lema, let us say that Hanikat Tanoi, these Tanoim arguing about something which is about to be cut off, is treated as if it was already cut off, or it's treated as if it's still attached and therefore it's part of the Eved, is actually a similar machlekes other Tanoim, similar concept. Hani Tanoi, the principle is the same. And what's that? Now we learned in the Mishnah, Rab Meir says, Yesh Devarim. For example, there's a law that says if you lend someone $100 and you come to claim it, and the guy says, I only owe you 50. So he's considered a Maida b'mikzas. We had this in Ksubas, we'll have moments here. He's considered a Maida b'mikzas, a partial admission, and the Torah says that a Maida b'mikzas, a taina, has to swear. What about when it comes to property? I said, I sold you whatever, so many properties, and you only pay, and you owe me money for that. And the guy says, no, you only sold me one property, and I owe you money for that. Is there a concept of Maida b'mikzas that he has to swear on the balance? And the din is by karka, there's no Maida b'mikzas. By karka, there's no Maida b'mikzas.
Why not?
Because we learn from a pasuk that by karka, there's no Maida b'mikzas.
Okay.
Hence, the because we'll talk about it Bamitzia there, of Dalad. So says the Gemara, what about if we talk about something that's growing, a vine, let's say that's growing, has grapes. So it's karka. There's no Maida mixes. I say, I lent you 10 gefanim, and you say, no, only got me 5. Right? So there's no, it's karka, but what we're really arguing about are the grapes that are about to be cut off and harvested. How do we view those grapes? Is it still karka? So there's no meidim and mitzvahs. I only have to pay what I admit to. I don't have to swear in the balance. Or do we say because it's about to be harvested, it's as if it's already detached and therefore it's metaltlin and you have to swear in the balance? So it's the same principle. Says the Gemara. And the question is, why do you need different, the same principles? Why do I have to argue about it twice? Rameir says, that things that appear to be ostensibly like property, but actually it isn't like property. Disagree. What's the case? Kate said, I gave you 10 vines filled with grapes. The guy says, no, you only gave me 5. Which are prepared to give back to you. Does he have to swear about the other 5 that he denies? Rameir says, chayiv, even though it's considered karka, and you don't swear made mix on karka, but because they're about to be harvested, they consider metalton, swear. And the chachamim karka, karka. If it's attached to the ground, the grapes, it's considered as if it's karka and property. And what are they arguing about? Grapes are about to be harvested. As if they're cut off already. And when Rabban hold, lav keeps to the damian. It's not like it was cut off. So it's the same principle that they're arguing about the hair. Why is it arguing about it twice? Says the Gemara, I feel I can say that the arguments are slightly different, the circumstances are different, and therefore just because Rameir holds one thing over here doesn't necessarily mean he'll hold the same thing in the case of the hair of the Evid. Here Rameir says by the grapes it's about to be harvested, it's treated as if it's already been detached. Does that necessarily mean that he would say the same thing regarding the hair of the Evid because it's about to be cut off, therefore it's as if it's cut off? I can argue that no. And what's the difference? No, what Rameir says over there, the grapes now, once they're ripe, if they hang around much longer, they become overripe, they become useless. So therefore, it's necessary to cut them off. And that's why Rameir says it's as if it's cut off already. In the case of the hair in a person's head, the longer it stays on the head, nothing happens. It just grows longer. It gets better. So therefore, maybe Rameir will say in that case, I agree. It's not considered cut off till you physically cut it off. Says the Gemara, went up. Omar, he said, he said over this entire subject, he said over what Rav said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, that Rav said that if you make your Eved, we had Rabbi Yechanan before, if you make your Eved Hefker, he goes free. And then Rabbi Chiya added, and you have to also give a star shikhr. In addition to being set free, so he no longer works for you, but you need also to give them this document this document of severance from the original owner allows this Eved to become a full-fledged Yid now, a total Yid. Says the Gemara, when he heard that, he said, Rab actually said that? As if he's amazed. The Gemara wants to know, what do you mean? Why is he amazed? Rabbi Yechon himself believes that's the halacha. But Rabbi Yechon doesn't say that. Rabbi Yechon said in the very name of Rabbi Yechon, if somebody makes his Eved Hefker, ownerless, Yatzil Chedes, he's set free. But if it's to get shikha, you need a document, a get shikha. So what's Rabbi Yechon's, why was he puzzled or amazed that Rav said it when he personally holds the same thing? This is what he's saying actually. Omar Rav Kavasi, he was surprised that Rav actually agreed with him. In so many cases we had before where Rabbi Yechon and Shlokish are arguing with Rav and Shmuel. He was surprised that Rav in this case agreed with him. Not that he disagrees, he's just surprised that he agreed with him. Or another version is there was 2 parts to it, that he's set free, but also that whether you need a get shich or not. If you remember, Shmuel's of the opinion, if you're mafker your Eved, you don't have to give a get shich. Shmuel's opinion, if you're mafker the Eved, so he's no longer treated like an Eved, and we learn from a pasuk, Eved Isha, that if you're no longer treated like an Eved, Eved Ish, if you're no longer treated like an Eved, you're free, you're full-fledged Yid. You don't need a get shich if you're mafker. But Rav argues as you do. So the thing is, when they told over to Rabbi Yechanan, they only told Rabbi Yechanan and said, if you mafke your Eved, he goes free. They didn't conclude whether you have to give a get shikhr or not. And that's what Rabbi Yechanan was wondering. So he says, another version is, they didn't have a chance to conclude what Rav said. Therefore he said, Rav didn't say get shikhr because they didn't bother telling him that. Said Rabbi Yechon the Tamei, Amar Ula, Rabbi Yechon said, Rabbi Yechon, Hamafkir Avda, if somebody makes an Eved Hefke, Yotzel Lechedes, he goes free. B'tzadeh get shichrur, and he requires a get shichrur. So Rav and Rabbi Yechon both say the same thing. If you make it get hefker, make it Eved Hefker, he's free, but you need to get shichrur. Gufa, let's analyze this. So the next few blot, as the last blot, is all about the laws of avodim. We'll have more of it in Kedushin in the middle of the first parak, but it's here also. Amar Gufa, let's analyze it. Amar Ula said, Amar Rabbi Yechon, Hamafkir Avda, if somebody makes his Eved Hefke, Yotzel Lechedes, he's set free, but he needs that document to set him free completely. And this is us. So in other words, we break up the Eved to two parts. The ownership that a person has in an Eved, there's two parts to it. There's the commercial side of it, and then there is the I guess the Isser side of it, the legal side of it, or the prohibitions that have come with it. And therefore we say the Hefker removes the commercial side of it, that he no longer serves as an Eved, but it does not in any way change the Isser. You're still an Eved Kanani halachically. Can't marry a Jewish woman. And that's where the get comes in. The get removes that Isser. So it says the Gemara, Rab Abba turned around to Ula and asked the question. So you said you need two things. You need Hefker and you need get Shechur. There's a question that says a ger. Every person has heirs. Everyone has Yoshim. The only one who has no Yoshim, no heirs whatsoever, is a ger. A convert, his brothers, his sisters, his parents, his daughters, they're no longer technically or halachically considered family. So if a ger passes away, what happens to the estate? It doesn't pass on to anyone. So now it's a free-for-all. It's ownerless. Anybody can come in. And we'll have a story. We had a story with Rava. We'll have a story in the Gemara later. Where Rava, for example, or whatever, so Namayra was in a ger's field, and he was there the whole time, and the ger died. Someone else came in and took the field away, and the halacha was the second person is kind of because the first person who was there the whole time never bothered making a kinyan, a form of acquisition, to make it his. In other words, a ger has the moment he died, his entire estate becomes hefker, and in order to acquire it, you have to make a kinyan, like you make a kinyan on anything which is hefker. So a ger shemes, a ger died. So all these people came in. Bizbiz is a strong word to use, like plunder, but they had every right to. It wasn't illegal. On the contrary, it's hefker. And in the state, amongst the asses, there were slaves. Ben gedolim, ben tanim. I don't care whether they were adults. I don't care if they were young. According to the Rabbanon, these avodim now are totally free, and because as soon as the ger died, they were the first ones who were able to acquire themselves, and therefore they sort of acquired themselves from hefker, just being there. And I don't care if they're old or young. Comes along Abba Shaul says no. Gedolim, I agree with you. Adults, they're kind of themselves, but bnei chayim, they're free. Or bektanim under bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah. Since they are not able to be koina, so therefore whoever takes them first will be koina. Now, even though a child is koina, that's only midrabbanon, and we say the Gemara says because of darkei shalom, we don't want people to go ahead and steal from little kids. Then Taisa brings an interesting subject we had in Gemara Sukkah, that a person, and this is very problematic in Chutz La'aretz, we have 2 days Yom Tov, you should not give your lulav and esrog to your child to make the bracha lulav and esrog, because they can be koine, but they cannot give it back to you. And we know that on Sukkot, the first 2 days, we need that the lulav and esrog should be lachem. The lulav and esrog should be ours. and over here, it's not ours. Over here, it's not ours. So therefore, what do you call it? So what do we see clearly from the Gemara there? That a child is koine. What do you mean when we say over here that a child cannot be koine, cannot acquire for themselves? So Rashi in Sukkah says it's only midrabban. Taisa seems to be learning that it's mahatorah. That's why you can't give it back. And it's all kinds of in halach it's problematic. So how do you get a child to do lulav and esrog? If you want to do correctly, you have to give it to them. How do they give it back to you? There's all different kinds of opinions. However, Taisa says it doesn't help.
No?
Okay. In a nutshell, there are two opinions how we understand Matanah Nas Lahachzir. One is that the rush. One is that I give you a matana, and it's only a matana if you give it back to me. So therefore, even a child, I can give him a matana and it's automatic. Merv, if you can just mute yourself, it automatically it automatically comes back to me. But there's another way of learning matana. I gave you matanas forever it's yours. But there's a condition that you need to give it back to me. In other words, by matanas lahachzir, do I need to make a kinyan to acquire it back, or is it automatically mine? If you learn the first way, I gave it to you, it automatically comes back to me. I don't have to make a new kinyan to make it back mine because it's automatic. That's part of the deal. But the second way of learning is I gave it to you forever. But the onus now is on you to give it back to me. Otherwise, I never gave it to you. Therefore, when I get it back, I have to make a kinyan. Therefore, even though it's a child, the child has to have the capacity to give it back to me. But the child can't.
Why does a child have to? If a child is under bar mitzvah, why does he have to be shalachim? Doesn't have to be his. It's only chinuch.
Excellent. The Prima Godim, actually, we're sort of digressing here, but the Prima Godim and the Mishnah Berurah wants to say that the question is, when you say chinuch, we have to train a child. That we have to train a child just the general overall mitzvah. The details are not important, or every detail, the way you would behave when you're over bar mitzvah or over bas mitzvah is exactly the way you should behave when you're 10 years old. So if you learn that it's just bechlolus, the pratim are not important, it's just generally take a little bit of esrog, then you're right. We don't need lechem, it's only a detail. But if you learn that chinuch means I have to train you today, the way you would perform this mitzvah, post bar mitzvah, post bas mitzvah, then I got to do every nuance, every detail has to be correct. So how do we do that? Some people, hold on to the rule and never let go. There's all kinds of. It's a beautiful discussion, and maybe one day we'll talk about it. Okay. Anyhow, Tesi concludes that when do we say a child's only kohen b'drabanan if a child picks up an object out there, it's hefker. But if you give it to the child, like by the lulav, you gave it to him, that's called das acheres makna. And therefore, the child is koine mehater. Anyway, getting back here. So according to Abba Shol, young children, avodim, they remain avodim, so anybody can take them. They can't be koine themselves. According to Chachamim, it makes no difference. Now, the Gemara continues. So what's the question? The Gemara continues. The chimi cost of get shichlelu. I have a problem. You just said that if somebody becomes hefker, you still need a divorce in order for the evidence to become a full-fledged Jew. Now that the ger died, so these people are hefker. Okay, but how do they become full-fledged Jews? Where's the shtar shichr? That's the question he asked. If you're right that you need a shtar shichr, because remember, according to Shmuel, you don't need a shtar shichr, no problem. But you, Rabbi Yechon, they say that shtar shichr. So what happened? Said the Gemara, Omar. So Ula said back, Domi Haimed Rabbanon. It seems to me that this rabbi, Rab Abba, is Kilagamri into Shmaita. He doesn't know how to learn. He doesn't know how to learn this Gesugi or generally. But he didn't bother explaining his answer. So now the Gemara is trying to work it out. The time am I? Why does he make that comment? What's wrong with this question? So the Gemara, Amar Rab Nachman said, because Ksavar Ula is of the opinion that Avdoi the ger is ki ishtoi. The eved of a ger has the same thing like the wife of a ger. And that is, while the ger is married to the woman, she is married to the woman. While the eved is married to while the eved is working for the ger, he's working for the ger. The only way a woman who's married to a man can get out of that while the husband is alive is through a get. The only way that an eved can leave his master while the master's alive is through a get shikhr. But once the husband dies, the wife is free, set free. He doesn't need a get anymore. The same thing with an eved. Once the master dies, the eved is totally free, doesn't need any shtar shichr in the case where the master died. It's not an ordinary case of hefker where we say you need also shtar shichr because the husband's still alive, like a woman. We're talking about here where the husband died, and we're comparing an eved to a woman as we learn Gzer Shav Allah. And therefore, if the master died, the eved is free, scot-free, doesn't need a get. So think about it. It's like a woman. If the husband dies, she's free without having to have a get. So too in this case over here, when the master died, they are free. They don't need a get shikhr. So it's not a question on ul at all. This is different than a case of hefker. Says the Gemara, so why talk about a ger?
Afilu Yisrael
Nami. Even if the master was a yid, the same thing. The master dies. the Eved should go free, and that's it. Why are you telling me a unique case that because the person is a ger sounds like something about a ger? What is it? Says the Gemara, no, there's a big difference. Because a Yisrael has Yoshim, has heirs. So what happens as soon as he dies? The Yoshim take over the becoming the new master. So because the Yoshim take over, become the new master, so therefore that prevents the Eved from being set free. But by a ger, the moment the ger dies, the Eved is hefker. And then we compare it to the wife. Just like a wife, and the husband dies, she's free, so to the Eved. So he says, why shouldn't the same thing apply that what if a Yisrael dies, that the Eved should be set free? Just like a woman. If you're comparing it to a woman, as soon as the husband dies, she's free. As soon as the master dies, the Eved should be free. Says the Gemara, but we have another pasuk. It's clear in the pasuk that a person dies, the avodim get transferred or get passed on to the next generation, to the children. That's part of inheritance. Says the Gemara, so let me ask you a question. If somebody made his Eved Hefker, okay, so the moment he made the Eved Hefker, if he passes away, he won't pass on to the children anymore because it's Hefker. What does the owner still have now? What rights does the owner have of the Eved? Nothing, except that the Eved is not totally free yet. He still has a master, and in order for the Eved to become a full-fledged Jew, requires a get, like we just said before. Make Hefker, you still need a get. So the owner has certain rights in this get, or certain connections to this get, to this Eved, and the only way to sever that is with a get. So now in this case, it does not pass on to the children. See, a person is mafkir is Eved and dies, in that case, since it does not pass on to the children anymore, because the Eved is a hefker, the only thing that the father still owned was the Isser in this Eved. So the Chayra, as soon as he died, he should be treated like a woman, and that's it, he's free. You told me the only reason why he's not set free is because it passes on to the children by Yisrael. But there's no children here. Because why is no children? Because you made the Eved Hefker. So now all you have is Isser. He should be treated just like the wife. As soon as the husband dies, as soon as the master dies, he should be set free. And who said no? Maybe Taka. The problem is, why did Amemar say, if a person makes his Eved Hefker and then he dies, the Eved is stuck. What do you mean stuck? He's in limbo. He's no longer an Eved, so he can no longer live with a maid, but he's not yet a full-fledged Yid, so he cannot live with a married, with a Bas Chayna, the Yiddish woman either, because he needs to get Shichur. The master died, and the Isser does not get passed on to the next generation. So if all he has was not a commercial value, but just an Isser, you cannot pass on an Isser to the next generation. As you know, the famous question of the Chag Yaakov, the Ned Yehuda, and Alter Rebbe, they all talk about, if a person dies on Pesach and he has whiskey and mashka that he didn't sell as chametz, are the children, the heirs, the Yoshim, kind of the chametz, and now they're over by Yerobah by Matzik, because they own the possession of chametz? Or do we say that Isser does not get passed on from in the Yerusha? You can only pass on something of value, something that has commercial value. Here, all you own is the Isser. Do you pass Isser on or not? And one of the proofs is this one right here. And we're saying that Amemar saying you cannot pass on, if all you own is the Isser, you cannot pass it on and bequeath it to your children.
Couldn't a tikkun be that the Yarshim reacquire? I mean, if he's Hefker, then acquire him back. So what's the problem?
But we just learned that the Eved is the first person on the scene. So he remains Hefker. Remember, as soon as the guy dies, he's Hefker. Even if they wouldn't make Hefker, as soon as the guy dies, Abba Shol and the Chacham all agree that an adult, he's there first. He's kain himself. They're only arguing regarding a minor, because a minor, doesn't have an ability to be kain, and according to Chamim, still there's no ownership anymore. Anyway, so Hakam Member said that Eved has no takana. According to you, you're telling me he's just like a wife. As soon as if he's hefker, and then the master dies, just like a woman, her husband dies, she's free. So to him, doesn't need to get shich. Says the Gemara, the Amema Kasha. Got a problem with Amema? What can we do? Says the Gemara, came along, Rabbi Yaakov Aridi, and the name Rabbi Shuma Levi. He says the halacha like Abba Shol is a difference in adults and minors. That minors someone else can come and take the minor. Do you know that for a fact that the halacha like Abba Shol? Just you worked it out from something else. My klala, if he worked it out from general observation, what exactly did he observe that he came to this conclusion? Of a comment Rabbi Shua ben Levi said. Rabbi Shua ben Levi said, no, the Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi said in the name of Shua ben Levi, not that Rabbi Shua ben Levi perhaps directly said, yes, the halacha is like Abba Shol. It's from an observation of something else Shua ben Levi said that I'm coming to the conclusion must be that that's what he holds. What's the story? So it says there, my klala, what exactly is the rule you're talking about? Amru Levi, Amru lifnei Rebbe. They said before Rebbe, Omar, what happens if a master says, Nisrayashti mepleni avdi, I've abandoned hope of finding this eved, of having this eved. Now, just a side issue, Rashi says over here, 2 lines from the top, Nisrayashti, Rashi says, Loshain hefkeru. Yiush and hefker is the same thing. Now, it's not the right place to talk about it, but you should know in Daf Samach Zayin, in Baba Kama, there's a traces there, and there's a big issue. Tzos and everybody else talks about if Yush abandoning something and Hefker is the same thing. We actually have a Machlekes B'Metzia, Rashi and Tesis. When somebody says it's Hefker, what does Hefker mean? Does Hefker mean that I'm walking away from the object? Nothing to do with me anymore? Or Hefker means I'm taking the object and I am giving it away to the entire world. In other words, is Hefker considered das acheres matn, I'm giving it away, or I'm just walking away? Same thing is, what's Yush? Is Yish walking away and then Hefker is giving away? So it's 2 different things, or it's the same, and big differences and big, I guess, what do you call it? In halacha, which way is the right way to understand it? And Rashi clearly says here that Nisayashti is Hefker. Okay, others want to say
Yush is giving up hope of ever finding an object.
Exactly, but halachically, what's the legal status of Yish? Is the legal state of Yish is that, so no, I'm giving hope, and therefore what? If I'm making it Hefker.
Yeah.
Is that what it means? What it means is I'm walking away from it, and Hefker might mean something totally different. Hefker means I'm giving it away to everybody else, and Yish means I'm walking away from it. I'm not giving it to anybody. I'm just walking away. Anyway, it's a side issue. So Gemara says, so they said before Rebbe, this person said, I abandon hope for my Eveds. What happens? What's it did? Amalam, he said to them, Oimer Ani, so Rebbe said, I think, Ein le takana el b'shtar. This Eved now, you made him like Hefker, right? So if you make him like Hefker, we say that, wow, that it's as far as the money side or the working side, he's Hefker. But I say also that you need a star. You need a star. Which is what we said before Rabbi Echad, they'll say that Hefker needs a star. In other words, to eliminate, to remove any strings to the master so that there's no longer any Isser here, and therefore this ever can become a full-fledged Yid. Okay, but Rabbi Echad said, when Rebbe said he has no takana, he meant to say he's like in a state of limbo as long as he doesn't get the star. Why a state of limbo? Because he's half no longer an Eved, he can no longer live with a maid. But on the other hand, he cannot live with a bas chayim, with a Yiddish woman, because he hasn't yet been totally set free. So he's ain't like takana, he's sort of in the state of limbo unless he receives a star. So then comes along Rabbi Yechon and says, my time with the Rebbe. What's the logic of Rebbe? Why do you need a star? He learns that from a Gzeir Shava, the word law that says by a woman, and law that it says chupasa lanutan law by we'll see in the Gemara later. Actually, it's talking about a woman who is half maid and half free. She had 2 masters. One of them set her free. So it's chetzia shivcha chetzia beschayrin. She's not totally yet free, and she lived with an Eved Ivri, and she's sort of also in a sort of a state of limbo. So she lives with an Eved Ivri, and so it's a Yid. And as far as a Yid is concerned, a Yid can live with her because Chatzi free, and also as far as that, because he's an Eved, he wants to live with the Shivcha part of her. And then what happens if somebody else commits adultery with her because he's not mamish a full-fledged marriage? So therefore, there's no punishment of a capital punishment here. But she gets lashes, and he has to bring a guilt offering, a carbon asham, for doing what he did. And it says in the pasuk there, the chupasa lanutan law. He did not give her, he didn't free her totally. And then another pasuk says, because of law, sefer creases, you give her a get. So we compare law of a woman to law here by a shifcha. Okay, ma isha b'shtar. It's like a woman is set free from her husband through a star. After not b'shtar, ever b'shtar. The Kodai, so then we ask the question, if we're comparing an Evet to an Isha, let's go further. Ma Isha Isura v'loima mayna. Just like an Isha, if you're comparing it to a woman, when it comes to a woman, what's the role of a get? Even though there's also, commercial arrangement, there's financial arrangement between the husband and wife, but what is the role of a get? The role of a get is to remove the Isser. A woman is not allowed to live with anybody else while she's married to this guy, this person. So the get removes the Isser. So just like by a woman, the get is specifically there to remove the Isser, is also here too. Af Eved Nami. So too by an Eved. Isura, what is the role of the Eved here? That the role of the Eved is only the Isser and not Mammon. So therefore, since we are learning that the Gzeres Shavah, we're comparing it completely to a woman. So we're only talking about, we're following Abba Shol's way, which is that we're talking about an adult who can be kind himself. So there's no money involved anymore because the adult was kind himself. So as far as the money is concerned, no, there's nothing left attached. The adult took over his own life. The only thing that remains between him and the original master is, let's say, or the family is the Issa part of it. That's all remained. Once he makes him but a child, even according to Chacham, a child, it doesn't really own himself yet. Okay, the question is whether somebody else can take possession of this child, but the child does not own himself yet. So there's still money involved as well. So when we're comparing it to a woman, we're saying there's no money involved. We're talking about an adult. So and then we're saying that the get shikhr comes in and sets him free. So obviously we're following Abba Shaul that says if the ger died, the only person that goes free and the get shikhr is an adult, not a child. That's how I thought that Rabbi Yeshua Levi rules like Abba Shaul. Says the Gemara, okay, that's how I learned it. What's the big deal? What's wrong with it? He said to him, you know what the big deal is? Because I can argue, for the argument's sake, I can say, I can learn like a Chacham as well. I can learn as follows. Ma Isha. No, maybe Rabbi Shuma Levi and follow the Chachamim. Why? Because we're comparing it to a woman. Ma Isha, doesn't matter how old the woman is, she can be divorced. Ben Gedoyle, Ben Tana, she's divorced. Let's look at it from a different angle and say, just like a woman, it doesn't matter how old she is, the husband could divorce. The same thing here. As long as she's intelligent enough to accept a divorce. So the same thing here, that an Eved, I don't care if old or young, can be set free. In other words, we follow Chachamim. So if it's a klala, it doesn't prove one way or another. So Amalei concluded, I actually heard him, Rabbi Shmuel Levi, say clearly that the halacha is like Abba Shaul. That was one version of what Rabbi Shua ben Levi said. That's Rabbi Yaakov Baridi. However, there's another version. We're having this a number of times already. We two Amoraim are arguing what someone else said. Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Chia bar Abba said Rabbi Yechanan, Ein halacha ki Rabbi Abba Shaul. Sorry, in this case here, it's the name of Rabbi Yechanan, not the name of Rabbi Shua Levi. Sorry. And by the way, general rule in halacha is whenever Rabbi Shua ben Levi and Rabbi Yechanan argue, we follow Rabbi Shua ben Levi. As Taisa said before, and that's a general rule. But Rabbi Chia bar Abba said Rabbi Yechanan exactly the opposite. Ein halacha ki Abba Shaul. Halacha is not like Abba Shaul. Did you hear directly from him? You just gleaned it from something else he said. My klala, what do you mean you gleaned somewhere else? Rabbi Shuma Levi. They said to Rabbi exactly the same thing. Rabbi Shuma Levi said, Yashti, that I was meyayish. I was meyayish, same thing as before, but this time he's going to come to the opposite conclusion, and then we're going to argue, how do you know which conclusion to come to? It's the what's it in? So I abandoned hope of recovering my Eved. So Rebbe said, I say, the person in the state of limbo, because now he made him hefker, he cannot marry a shivcha. Another, and he cannot marry full-fledged because he needs a star. You need a star, a get. Rabbi Yechon said, my time the Rebbe, what's the sword of Rebbe? He learns that from Isha. Ma Isha b'shtar Eved, like an Isha with a star, an Eved also if he's no longer in the work, I guess working for the master because he's been a hefker. If the master then dies, he's set free, just like a woman set free when her husband dies. The Kodayekim, so therefore you concluded, if you're learning from Isha, let's go all the way. Isha, Ma Isha ben Gedoyle ben Tana, I don't care how old she is. Af Eved Nami ben Gadol ben Katan. Eved also, I don't care how old he is. So the halacha like a Chamim, even an Eved Katan is totally free. Why does it bother you if it's a klola? Isn't that a good proof? No. Adrabah. I can argue. Abzeda now saying I can argue the other way around. So why don't you learn the other way around? Ma isha isha. There's no money involved, only isa. So by Evid, it would be talking about an adult because he's kind himself. That's it. There's no longer any money attached to the original owner. Evid also is only talking about an Evid as an adult, but an Evid, a child, since the Evid, the child cannot really own himself, there's still money involved. Amalek said to me, you know what? The Feder Shmida, I actually heard Rabbi Yochanan clearly say that the halacha like a chami. Let's go back and he said, so he said, he said that Rebbe said that what? There's no other takana, only wishtar. This is what Rebbe said. But Tanya, didn't we learn yesterday? Rebbe said, I say, we're talking about a person said that my whole estate should go to the Hegdish, and included in his estate, there were also slaves there. So they had an argument whether the slave can sort of redeem himself or not, or Hegdish is only has the right to sell it to somebody else. Hegdish cannot really set this person free, because that's what we had a discussion, whether it's the value, or the Eved himself has been consecrated. So we say let's say you gave the Eved to the Hegdish in order to sell. So if you gave the Hegdish in order to sell to make money, the question is whether you can sell it directly to the Eved himself. Can the Eved himself, give an IOU, or somebody gave him money on the condition that no one else, that his master doesn't take it, and the Eved can pay his own way out. And so the question actually is, when an Eved redeems himself, is that considered like he's buying himself, he's buying his freedom, or is that considered that like sort of redemption, which is a totally different state? And that's the argument here by Hegdish. When you gave the assets to Hegdish, as if you're saying, and then you can now go and sell it. That's it. So if shichrur if an Eved pays his own way out, it's considered like you sold it, but to the Eved himself, then what's the difference? You're selling it to a stranger, to the Eved. But if you learn that shichrur, the money he uses to redeem himself, is not considered a sale. It's a different kind of modus operandi. Then the Hegdish has no right to do that, because the only thing that Hegdish has the right to do is to sell it. So Rebbe said, I say, I believe you can give it to the Eved, because like I just said, Rebbe holds that when this Eved redeems himself, it's actually buying his freedom. And therefore, what's the difference? He's buying it or somebody else is buying it? Yeah, so what do you see from here? What? It seems from here that you could, buying is enough. Why do you tell me that Rebbe says you also need a star? It seems from here that just buying himself out, he's free, totally free. Says this is what he meant. You have two choices. Either he can redeem himself by paying money, and therefore he's totally free. He doesn't need a document with it, or he also he does a star. If you make it hefker, you need a star. So there's only two ways: either kesef or the star. No other way. Why? Because it says in the pasuk by this chetzi shivcha chetzi b'schayrin, it says you didn't. It says two alternatives. You didn't. It says in the pasuk, have the loy nivda, so he didn't redeem himself. Or you didn't give him this star, this get to set him free. So it's clearly the Torah is saying that two alternatives: either this or that. That's one view. So the Gemara, and he got himself out by paying money. So the Gemara, this negates, or the other opinion, which is Rabbi Shimon. The time of Shimon, he says, no. He says, Mishum Rabbi Akiva, that the only way to get out is with a contract. The only way to become a full-fledged Jew, he needs a get from the master. What about money? And that very pasuk says, you didn't get a get, or you didn't get money. So he says here, I would have thought you hate kesef geiva book. I would have thought that money just finishes off, severs their relationship, just like a contract does, a star. If you look at the pasuk clearly, the pasuk says that this person who committed adultery with this woman who is half a shifcha, half a bas chayden, doesn't get killed. She gets malchus, and the pasuk says, why is she considered sort of not really married? You talking about she didn't get yet her full freedom, nor did she redeem herself completely. Okay, but then the pasuk concludes, Lo yumsu, why won't they die? He loichu pasa because she didn't receive yet that contract that sets her free to become a full-fledged Jew. Had she been a full-fledged Jew and then she married this Eved Ivri, they would become totally married, and if she commits adultery, they would be killed. Now, the pasuk only highlights the fact that she did not receive a get. According to Rebbe, it should have said, and they didn't receive a get, nor did she redeem herself. That proves that the only reason why she would have been killed is if she would have received the get, because that's the only time they should consider full-fledged Yid. So we have the loin livdos. It says the pasuk. They didn't redeem herself. The entire parsha is really talking about the main highlight here is that she did not receive the star, that get. Only the star that sets her free and turns her and transforms her into a full-fledged Yid, not money, because the Torah finishes ki loichu posa. He said halacha like Rav Shimon that what that only Eved requires a star shichr in order to be free and a full-fledged Yid. And Rabbi Yosef Bar Chama Rabbi Chama said name Rabbi Yochanan Ein halacha ki Rav Shimon. The halacha is not like Rav Shimon, and that money or star set you free. Ashkei Nachman once encountered two Rabba. He encountered Lerabba Bar Shela. Or Rabba Bar Shela, different opinion. To have a koya pistol until standing on the doorway of the shul. Amalei. So what do you say when you don't say Shalom Aleichem or anything else? He's ready to go. Halacha ain't halacha. Is halacha of Shimon not? Amalei. So this is what Nachman said. Ani Yomer, I say ain't halacha. I say the halacha is not like Rav Shimon, but like Rebbe that want that you can either set himself free through money or through a star. But Rabbanon, the Asim Mechuzah, but the rabbis who came from Mechuzah, Amri, they say. Omer Rab Zayda said, Mashmei, Rab Nachman, the halacha is like Rab Shimon, that the only way for an Eved to become a full-fledged Yid is if he gets to receive the get. But v'chasoyi l'sura, when I came to Surah, Kach, they found Rab Chia Bar Ravin. Amri le, I said to Rab Chia Bar Ravin, tell me, easy, gufa duv they have. Tell me what happened now. Tell me the incident, and why did the paskin one way or another? Amali dahi amsa. This is what happened. Actually, we never heard Rab Nachman say clearly that the halacha is like Rab Shimon. We just gleaned it from a certain incident, and therefore we'll soon see that he actually misinterpreted what happened. What happened was a maid, the Havimada, her master was dying. He was on his deathbed. Asa, she went to him, Bachi Kameh, she cried her heart out. Amrullah, she said to him, Ad Emas Tishtabid V'Tezlahi Itza. How much longer are you going to force me to remain a slave? And, I have to pass on to your children. Set me free. You're dying. Let me go. So what he did was, Shakal Kumse, he took his hat, Shadaba, he threw it to her. What was the point of that? Amala, he said to her, Zil Kani. One of the kinyanim is a kinyan chalipin, which is the most common kinyan like you read in the Rus. The Zaislif and the funny so this is how they used to do in the good old days. Kinyan chalipin, which is shalom, they used to take the shoe off. And the way it works is that I give you something of value, or as long as it's worth a pruta, and or a keli, we'll see later. And in exchange of that, you're giving me something else. We have a big argument in halacha. Who is the one that has to give the handkerchief? Say we do a handkerchief, we'll say, who's the one that has to give the handkerchief? The vendor or the purchaser? And what do you call it? We're going to learn that the halacha is actually that the one who's buying it. When let's see, you go to a Rav to sell the chametz, the Rav gives you a handkerchief or a garter, whatever it is, and the Rav is buying it from you. And in exchange, you sell the chametz. That's the halacha. But what happened here was, here the buyer is the maid, the seller, the vendor is the person who's dying. So the person who's dying threw his hat to her and said, here, and this hat, in exchange of this hat, you're a free person, let's say. But the vendor was the one who gave the material, the article to use for chalipin. And that was a problem because it should be the buyer who gives to the vendor and he said, let's say her hat. In exchange of the hat, I'm free. So that's what happened here. But they misinterpreted what happened. So this was a story. So then he said to her, Zil Kane, here, take this gartel and you're koine and be koine the gartel. In exchange of that, you are free. Also, then he died. So they went to the Nachman, want to know what the story is. He said to them, she's not free. That's what happened. So they interpreted. Man the Chaza, the one who witnessed this, thought was Allah Rav Shimon. Why is she not free? Because Allah like Shimon that you need a get. Shichrur, you need a get, and this man died without giving her that bill of divorce. This woman that she become a full-fledged yid. But it was wrong. You know what the problem was? Should have the Caleb Shamakne. It was the vendor who gave the hat rather than the buyer. So therefore, even a Nachman, we don't know what he would paskin when it comes to our story here. Shimon or Rebbe. Shmuel, the son of Achisoi, said in the name of Rabbi Nuna Sava. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Ashi, in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak bar Ashi, the son of Shi, and Rabbi Nuna, in the name of Rabbi Nuna, Halacha Kirab Shimon. All of these people were saying that halacha, or at least in the name of ultimately of Rabbi Nuna, the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon, that only a star transforms the eved into a full-fledged yid. Money won't do it. However, the concludes the law is not right. Ain't halacha Kirab Shimon. Halacha like Rabbi Shimon. Amar Rav Zeda, Amar Rav Chanina, Amar Rav Ashi, Amar Rebbe. Eved, if you have a slave, Shenasa is Bas Chayre Mitnei Rabbi, who married a Yiddish woman right in front of his master, and he didn't protest. What does that tell us? It tells us that probably the master already set this Eved free. He's a full-fledged Yid, and therefore no Aveda is happening right now. He's entitled to marry anyone he wants, and therefore the rabbi was quiet. So we are reading or interpreting his actions. Is Yotzel Chedus, he goes free because we believe for sure the rabbi already set him free. This is a sign of that this Eved has been freed previously. This we weren't aware. Rabbi Yechon said, he said that this is how you interpret Rebbe. In other words, you decided that you're going to follow this view. Because I believe I believe something totally different. We have an argument. What happens if the master writes a star to marry his own maid? He says to a maid, Hare at mikudeshes li, which is one of the three ways of marrying, of getting a woman engaged to a woman, the first mission in Kedushin. And he says it's his own maid. Rameh says mikudeshes. Now, why was it mikudeshes? Because how would he do? He's doing an Avera living with his maid, unless he must have set her free previously. So that proves to us that she's free. But the Chachamim say, ain't no Mikudeshes. The Chachamim say that she's not Mikudeshes, because maybe she's still a maid, just because he's doing an Avera. So therefore there's no marriage here, and it doesn't prove anything. And since the Chachamim, I'm sure Rebbe would follow the Chachamim. So what's going on? And how can you tell me? Rebbe says if the master saw this is worse. It's not just the master watching the Eved and saying nothing with you. Oh, it must be that he set her free. Here, the master himself is doing the Avera. The master is trying to marry this Shivcha, and we don't automatically assume he must have set her free. So
don't you need Eidim?
Sorry, yes, they do, but they don't know if he's free or not free. They just saw him giving her the star. Says the Gemara. You know what they're talking about in this case over here, that when the Rebbe says the master was there, didn't say anything, that it must be that the Eved is free. It's more than just the master stood there silently. It's more than that. It's like Rabbi Bashela says in the next Gemara, if you see an Eved wearing tefillin, we're going to assume the Eved is set free because it's the master who gave his tefillin to the Eved to put on. So because the master was proactive in this, we'll say it must be that the Eved is free. The same thing here. It's talking about that the master is the one who got this Eved to marry this other woman there. So it must be that the master wouldn't do Aveda for his Eved. It must be that the Eved was already set free. Says the Gemara, talking about the master gave married woman. So I don't understand what's going on here. When the master goes to the Eved and says, I want you to marry this woman, we're going to assume it must be that this Eved has been set free. But in this case here, when the master is marrying the maid himself, he's doing the maid himself, not just allowing his Eved to do the maid. He's doing the maid himself. We say, not engaged, because who says they ever got, he ever set her free? How can that be? How can it be? The La'avde, he's worried about his servant doing an Aveda, so that we assume he won't do an Aveda, it must be set him free. The EU of it is sooner, but he himself will live with this. It doesn't make sense. He will live with this maid, and we'll say, yeah, maybe he wants to do an Aveda. How can it be? When it concludes, you know what we're talking about over here? The Amala, this is what happened. Different, this is a unique case. He gave her a star kedushin, and he said to her, boy, boy, use this star to set you free, and use this star to be engaged. And all the star said in it was, Hare at muteris l'chol adam. The question is, can you interpret the words that you are mutter as if this is also some kind of words of setting her free? And that's what we're talking about. Rabbi Yisrael, yes, includes in that also a language that you're setting her free. And Rabban Savri ain beloshen hazel loshashikhr. You never set her free, and therefore Rabban say, all you're doing is you want to marry her, but she's still a maid. How can you marry her? That's the machlekes here. So whether the language he's trying to set her free, whether the language incorporates that or not. Okay, we'll stop over here. Everyone have a Shavua Tov, a good Bach.
Good